Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We're going to be talking about Psychonauts 2 today. Now this is a game that I wouldn't usually cover on this channel. I'm not a big fan of Psychonauts. I mean, I know it's a very highly respected game, but it's not really for me, and it's not usually something I would talk about on this channel in the same way. Double Fine is a very good developer and I totally recognise that, but it's not really my kind of thing. I'm more about JRPGs and pervy things that Double Fine don't usually do. But Psychonauts 2 is in the media this week for reasons that aren't its own fault, but are reasons nonetheless. And I wanted to do a video about this because I realised I haven't talked about this topic on this channel at any point in the past. And I wanted to have a video on record because it is so cyclical, it comes around over and over again. It is going to come around again, this topic, and I want to have a video on record so I can just point to that rather than potentially have to talk about it next time. I am, of course, talking about difficulty, and difficulty is, for reasons I don't think I'll ever understand, somehow controversial in this industry. Not just difficulty and accessibility. For some reason, people don't want games that are accessible to everybody, and as a result, when a game actually tries to be accessible, they tend to throw a bit of a tantrum. So the news here is that Double Fine is implementing an invincibility toggle into Psychonauts 2. And what that means is if you find the game too difficult at any point, you can turn this on and, as the name of it suggests, become invincible. It becomes very easy to finish the game because you can't die or otherwise fail. Double Fine is pitching this as an accessibility thing. That means that players of any age, young or old, of any level of experience, they could be very new to games, it could well be their very first game, and people who have disabilities or other such handicaps are able to play the game comfortably at their own level and still get to the end and enjoy the entire experience. As I said, I would think that that's a good thing. The more people that can play a game, the better for it. The better the discussions around it. Like any artwork, and remember video games are supposedly works of art, any artwork is designed to be seen and experienced by as many people as possible because that generates conversation, and the more conversation that gets generated around the work of art, the deeper the understanding of it and the more valued it becomes to society. The reason Shakespeare is so important to us is because people talked about Shakespeare and have continued to talk about him in the many years since. So accessibility, allowing as many people as possible to finish a game, is a good thing. It's a fundamentally good thing. But for whatever reason, when difficulty is concerned, there is a legion of people out there that take offense to the idea that other people are taking the easy route as such through a game. And I don't understand why, because it is optional. You do not have to engage with it if you don't want to. But there is a bunch of people out there that have in their heads that if other people are playing the game too easy, then for some reason the game itself is diminished. And we have this conversation every time a difficult game hits the market. Every time there's a Dark Souls out there, there is that conversation about whether Dark Souls should have an easy mode. If it did, whether it would ruin the game, so on and so forth. From Software, the developer of Dark Souls, created Sekiro. Someone created a patch for Sekiro that made it easy, and that became a controversy because how dare somebody make Sekiro easy? Not for everybody, just for that person, but how dare they do that? Cuphead was another example. Every time there's a difficult game that comes out, the idea that developers may want to put something in that game that makes it less of a struggle for some people really triggers a bunch of gamers. And I've never completely understood why. And I think it is quite... well, I mean, it's very anti-art because it tries to exclude the number of people that can play a game to a very limited body of people. Now, one of the counter-arguments that I almost always hear every time this conversation comes up is, well, if the developer wanted to do it, if it's a work of art, then maybe we should respect the developer's decision. But the thing is, they're not mutually exclusive positions to take. I believe that if a game developer wants to make a game brutally difficult, then they should absolutely be able to. I'm always on the side of people, on the same side of people that say that From Software doesn't have to put an easy mode into a game if they don't want to. I firmly believe that if From Software has an artistic position that says Dark Souls cannot have an easy mode, then Dark Souls should not have an easy mode. What From Software and the fans and everybody else needs to understand is that the lack of an easy mode in Dark Souls means that there is going to be some criticism of Dark Souls. because it's too difficult, because some people can't get through to the end of it. And they need to be comfortable with that, because that is part of the conversational process. If you can't experience a work of art because it is too challenging, then you need to be able to say so. And the artist needs to be comfortable with that. And for the record, I do think that From Software is quite comfortable with being criticized for being too hard by some section of the community. I think they've accepted that that is going to happen with their games. It's the fans that can't seem to accept that. But the fans need to accept that there is going to be some criticism about Dark Souls games for lacking an easy mode. But again, if they want to do that for an artistic reason, then they should. The problem with that argument, the real problem with this argument, is that it never seems to work in the reverse. These people never seem to accept the artist's decision to make their game more accessible. Most of the people that are out there criticizing Psychonauts for having this invincibility toggle are the same people that say we should respect the artist's right to make the game difficult if it's a Dark Souls title. So From Software we need to accept and respect for their artistic decisions, but Double Fine's not allowed to make the artistic decision to have an easy mode in their game. And I think that is really where the problem lies with me, because there's a level of hypocrisy in there that developers can't make their game accessible, but we have to respect them when they decide they don't want their game to be accessible. And look, I have tried to understand why some people have this issue with other people playing games in a way that they don't agree with. It's important to understand because I want this conversation to go away. I would much rather talk about the narrative design, the artistry of Dark Souls, than have to have this conversation about difficulty every time a new Dark Souls game comes out. When that Final Fantasy Team Ninja Koei Tecmo Dark Souls-like comes out in a year or two, or however long it's going to take, I would rather talk about how they've adapted the original Final Fantasy in a way that's relevant 30-odd years later, than have to have the inevitable conversation about how they've handled difficulty, because that is going to be the inevitable conversation. I would much rather us focus our energy on these difficult games, or games that are not difficult like Psychonauts. I would much rather us focus our energy on these games on their merits as works of art. But in order to do that, we've got to understand why there are some people that are so hung up about difficulty that we can address their concerns. And I just can't. I have a sense in my head that perhaps they feel like, you know, these games are part of their identity and they don't want to see that compromise. They want people to experience these games in a very specific way that has meant something very important to them. And I kind of get that. I mean, when I play a Dark Souls game, and one of the reasons I support the difficulty of Dark Souls is that the brutalizing experience that it offered was something quite special to me, and I found that quite compelling. But as a game critic, everything I've done on digitallydownloaded.net and everything I've done with this channel has been to try to encourage other people to play games, experience these games that have meant a lot to me. And if an easy mode is a way that they can play the game, then I don't understand how you could protest against that. It really is just it's just such a completely different mindset that I try to understand it, and I just can't wrap my head around it. So I would definitely be very interested in people, you know, who are tuning in to let me know their thoughts about why this difficulty conversation just won't go away, and why, I guess, the other thing that's worth noting here is that accessibility options in video games is generally accepted these days. People are quite accepting of colorblind modes or of dyslexic-friendly kind of texts. When The Last of Us 2 came out, which was a really good example of accessibility in video games, it had pages after pages of different things you could do with the game in the settings to make it comfortable for you, the way that you'd like to play video games, or what you can handle in video games. And people were generally quite accepting of all of those kinds of accessibility options. The one accessibility option that the one accessibility option that tends to be controversial with a group of people that they just cannot accept on any level is this difficulty one. And it is also quite strange because difficulty settings have kind of been, or ways to get around difficulty has kind of been there since the dawn of video games. And back with the original Doom, for example, you could enter cheat codes in that made you invincible, that allowed you to clip through walls, that you could get to the end of the game in a snap with. And they were kind of cool. People love to share those cheat codes. But when it becomes an accessibility option, all of a sudden it becomes an issue for the same people that, again, quite enjoyed sharing those cheat codes around with Doom. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Let's have a conversation about this, and let's get this video down on record so that I don't need to talk about it again. I can just point people to this video and then talk about stuff that is more interesting in the future. Please do let me know your thoughts, though. I'm very keen to hear. If you enjoyed this video, please do click that like and subscribe button. That way you won't miss any that I do in the future. And if you enjoy my work, please consider backing me on Patreon. You can do so for $1 a month or a little bit more if you're feeling generous. And in doing so, you're supporting the website, the YouTube channel, the podcasts, everything else that I do. And you also do get the visual novels and my monthly magazine that I do, which is exclusive to Patreon backers as a bonus. And that monthly magazine is amazing. If I do say so myself, I'm having a lot of fun doing them. They're filled with information not just about games, but also Japanese culture, Japanese art, Japanese cinema, Japanese literature. It really is giving you a bit of a context about the culture that has produced these games that I love so much. So you get that for at least $1 a month, or as little as $1 a month, I should put it that way, be more of a marketer. And yeah, I think it's pretty good value. So thanks as always for tuning in. We'll see you next time.